Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you from all over Belgium, and especially to our keynote speaker, Peter Baker, CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Welcome, Peter. He is connected from Switzerland. And a warm welcome to Jacques van der Meren, Chairman of the Board of the Shifts and CEO of the Port of Antwerp, and to our moderator, Jorn Verbeek, Head of Research and Innovation at Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. I'm actually enjoying having Jacques and Jorn here with me. They are in another place just to allow me to do my speech without a mask. And of course, everybody is respecting physical distancing. And it's actually a pleasure and honor for me, although I would have preferred to have a real working dinner with all of you. It's an honor for me and for Solvay to be hosting this event in the Maison Ernest Solvay, which used to be our founder's private residence in the center of Brussels at the occasion of this initiative of the Shift. I hope you are all safe, you enjoy your summer break, a rather unusual one, I can imagine, given the COVID uncertainties, but good and restful nevertheless to recharge your batteries with positive energy in a year that is probably challenging for all of us. I will shortly give the floor to Jacques, who will elaborate on how the Shifts and the Antwerp Ports Authority are working on value creation through stakeholder collaboration. He will also introduce Peter and his keynotes on systems transformation and stakeholder capitalism in times of the new normal. We at Solvay, we are extremely proud to be a long-standing member of the Shifts and the WBCSD. Such networks of international and transformational leadership of different horizons are instrumental in accelerating the transition and the journey, by the way, to a more sustainable world. Such partnerships allow us to shape and implement best practices, and I call it a positive contagion. We are learning from each other, we copy the best, and we have a license to copy from the best. And they are also key in pushing us to set bolder targets to redefine and unlock the superior value that sustainability brings to business, to nations, to countries and their inhabitants, especially with today's crisis. So maybe the question is, how do we at Solvay redefine value, look beyond near-term profits, and what does sustainability stand for at our company? Sustainability has been one of our core values. It's simply in the DNA that we built over the course of nearly 160 years. Today, it's at the heart of our strategy. Our company, any company actually, will not stand the test of time if it doesn't leave a positive impact on the environment and society at large. And I personally believe that we will have no future unless we raise the bar in terms of sustainability. And that's exactly what we did early this year at Solvay, adding deeper dimensions and strengthening our foundation in the arena. In short, we address the environmental and societal inequality challenges through our purpose and our ambitious sustainability roadmap, which is embedded in our group strategy. We believe that all starts with the why we are in business, why customers come to us, and why employees want to work with us. I personally believe that immortal companies, the companies that last and the best in class, are purpose driven. Our purpose at Solvay is we bond people, ideas and elements to reinvent progress with a vision to create sustainable shared value for all. The purpose is our compass, is our driver and inspiration every day to attain our strategic roadmap, which entails both financial and non-financial goals, obviously. Regarding our environmental strategy, quickly, we call it Solvay One Planet. Obvious, it's part of our business strategies. It's not something top down, which the CEO dictates, or it's sitting in, an annual report. It's really part of the business strategies. And sustainability for us is about making superior, lasting business, impacting the people, the planet, and of course the profits, or I should call it prosperity. And our new approach, which we launched in February, just before the crisis started to globalize, it's very holistic. While before we were much focused on climate, on CO2 emission, which is still obviously a key pillar, we are aiming now, and we have 3 pillars. We are aiming to protect the climate, the resources, and to contribute to a better life through a number of objectives. And those objectives are part of our bonus payments, including mine, by the way. So we walk the talk. This is not, again, concept paper. How we did that, and I think there are a few things I'm proud of. We are reinventing progress with pioneering goals, for example, in reducing our impacts on biodiversity. It's new to us. Again, we were talking about climate more than anything else, and just before, again, the globalization of the crisis due to COVID-19, I think our claim and our goal on diminishing and decreasing the impacts we have on biodiversity took, you know, a bigger dimension and full sense. We also committed to increase our share in the circular economy, where we aim to double the sales of products based on renewable resources to 15% of group sales by 2030, and coming from 7%-ish these days. For this, we have a partnership with Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who facilitates, you know, the partnership across the value chain, such as through a consortium that we've been building up to recycle batteries, for example. But we can also count on our customers, on our suppliers, such as in electronics, smart devices, for example. People buy our polymer material not only for their superior quality, but also because we manufacture them with renewable energy, for example. You may not know, but we recycle the rice husk and we bioferment it to provide to the whole world natural vanillin, which goes into your cakes. You may have enjoyed a bit more during the confinement, all right? I call it reimagining businesses, reimagining value chain, building, you know, a circular ecosystem. And we are also, of course, on cleaner mobility, be it EV, electrical vehicles, or hybrid and fuel cells for hydrogen-based mobility. We are also preparing the company for new ways of thinking and working. Take our parental leave. We offer 16 weeks of leave to our employees, regardless of the gender, to take care of their newborn. And we have announced this week that we will move to mobile working whenever possible. So mobile working is home, is office, and as we embrace the new lifestyles, despite, you know, outside and beyond that, we are all facing a crisis of lifetime. So to score in a Solvay One Planet type of approach, which is bold, which is, you know, very ambitious, we needed a tool. We needed a tool because you improve what we monitor and what you track. And we have a tool which is recognized as best these days in class by the likes of Harvard Business School. And that allows us to monitor and track our progress, connecting the financials, the sustainability, and the societal impact. This tool has a name, Sustainable Portfolio Management. It enables us to evaluate our application, our markets, our products, and our innovation pipeline, and even our acquisitions, to answer to the question, what business lines, what technologies should Solvay promote to grow and to be more sustainable? So you can imagine for a second that this creates tension with our business unit, the existing ones, because we are challenging them on their existing businesses. And it supports and challenges them to make the right choices going forward. This pandemic and its ensuing economic crisis is a tragedy for many, and we should recognize that. While we need to prevent the disease from causing more personal loss and economic damage, we need to keep our eye on another ball too, that of climate change. And during these global stress tests, we all have been stress tests, right? We've seen a rise in nationalism and protectionism and the breaking of supply chains, which is very critical, you know, for the industry. But I'm an optimist. I'm optimist by nature, by design, by birth, and I mostly see the positive side and the potential these may reveal. We mobilized governments across the European Union, for example, which freed up unseen amounts of funds to support the economy and its recovery. We got together to help out healthcare workers, neighbors, and colleagues with mask gels. And this crisis has shown that under pressure, solidarity is there. Companies like ours have a role to play in developing and reskilling our employees and build what I would name and call a responsible capitalism. We stepped up the protection of our people worldwide by creating in our company what we call the Solve Solidarity Fund. And thanks to the donation in the form of holidays for people who cannot, you know, afford to give euros or dollars, or financial support from employees and the executive committee and our shareholders, we raised 12 million euros in just few weeks to help out colleagues, families, communities in need as a result of the COVID crisis. Some of our sites spontaneously, I would say, adapted their manufacturing to produce hand gels, and they've never done this before, or face shields to help out healthcare workers. And all in all, they've donated 1 million of bottles of hydrogels, and we are still counting. And those are, you know, small examples of what humanity can do when it mobilizes under pressure and in a crisis, and show the best and be at their best, right, to support, you know, people around us. Also, our digital transformation. We've been all confined almost overnight. And at Solvay, when I was thinking this is impossible, we put 10,000 employees in 2 weeks' time in March, you know, in a virtual world, connecting from home and still talking to their customers and ensuring business continuity. It's just fabulous. In fact, I said it to our people, we surprised ourselves. And we've been reinventing this progress all along the road, and we should not stop here. However daunting, and this is a once-in-a-life opportunity to rethink how we invest in our future to create a more sustainable, a more resilient world. The way we mobilize against COVID-19 can be taken as a path to less visible challenges such as climate, although it's documented and it's real, and biodiversity and rising inequalities. So listen, multi-stakeholder collaboration between companies, governments, NGOs, simply the citizens will be central in achieving this. Let's ensure that we leave that legacy as a leaders. And I know that there are hundreds of CEOs joining us tonight because we are the very last generation who have the luxury to make a choice. Let's not waste the crisis. Thank you very much. And back to you, Jack.
Thank you, Ilham, for your very kind words and for hosting this event here in the beautiful Ernest Solvay house. I'm the only one able to sit here. Unfortunately, all the other ones are somewhere at home or at the office. So first of all, good evening, ladies and gentlemen and dear friends. Of course, I'm pleased to be joining you all for this very relevant get together. We had to switch to this digital format, unfortunately, and I would have been or loved to see you all in person. However, meetings like this in person or not, where we gather to share our ideas and challenges are more than ever crucial to move forward, in my belief. These past few months we have challenged, or the past few months have challenged us all in finding solutions and answers to the COVID-19 crisis. But we cannot be fooled by certain shocks we experience and only strive towards short-term solutions. Like Ilham was mentioning, this pending COVID-19 crisis, we are confronted with current geopolitical challenges like trade wars and increasing protectionism. but also with the consequences of the climate change and the long-lasting droughts, the forest fires, and more intense heat waves. It shows, in my belief, that we have pushed some boundaries too far. These long-term disruptive evolutions urge us to design a long-term strategy which we can act upon step by step to return or restore that fragile balance. And it's clearly time to review business models and make the shift towards a circular economy that not only creates the financial wealth, but also human and natural wealth. Europe leads the way on the global stage. The European Green Deal and its pathway towards a carbon neutral society and economy hands a useful toolbox to accelerate the necessary transition. Many of you as entrepreneurs and good friends can have a big impact. We have the power to help reshape the world. And it's clear we cannot do this on our own. Big challenges can only be addressed by means of collaboration. And that's why I'm very pleased and honored, of course, to be the president of the SHIFT, a local representative of the World Business Council on Sustainable Development in Belgium, and also a unique platform and forum that brings together a wide and diverse range of motivated players, companies, civil society, and NGOs. I'm particularly pleased of this event today. Ever more organizations understand the need for our current economic models to evolve in order not become irrelevant for the future. And you are all here today because your organization is member of the SHIFT, and our team works closely with your teams to help them to drive and accelerate the sustainability agenda. The SHIFT wants to inspire to make a steady shift and to make the transition to a sustainable societal model that redefines the concept of value creation and how we can cherish our planet and its raw materials. The current crisis has made today's themes, system transformation and stakeholder capitalism, more relevant than ever. Redefining value by taking into account one's impact on the environment, society, and governance has a range of advantages. It allows organizations to analyze and manage risk, to gain a competitive advantage, and to seize new opportunities. In creating such value, a company serves not only its shareholders, but all its stakeholders, like employees, customers, suppliers, local communities, and of course, the society as a whole. The moment to make the shift is now. The historical significance of the situations we are in is huge. And the World Economic Forum founder Klaus Schwab titled it The Great Reset. He emphasizes not to underestimate this historical window of opportunity to make our world a greener, a safer, a cleaner, a healthier, and a fairer place for all of us. And it's no longer a choice between sustainability and profitability. It is a complementary combination. Planet and prosperity can thrive in coexistence. I believe is right, and we will be able to find a balanced formula. As business leaders and policymakers, we must use this crisis as an opportunity to reset. Partnerships will be key to the success. By building bridges between organizations and companies, we will be able to find answers to common challenges. And the strength of the network and ability to initiate coalitions is also at the heart of the Port of Antwerp's mission. At the Port of Antwerp, we want to lead by example. We want to be a frontrunner, a community builder, and we want to show to the world that making the shift is really possible. And we team up with frontrunners and create partnerships around innovative subjects. In Antwerp, this approach has resulted in some very ambitious lighthouse projects on, for instance, green energy, on carbon capture and usage, on waste heat and on alternative shipping fuels. We are experiencing a unique window of opportunity to examine and improve the way in which societal actors are cooperating. We absolutely need to find more and better ways to cooperate and support each other in this process, because the network always wins. I have now the honor, Peter, to leave you the floor, and I believe you will talk us through your inspiring keynote on system transformation, stakeholder capitalism in times of new normal. Peter, you have the digital floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. It's great to be with you. Unfortunately, not in Brussels myself, but as soon as that's possible, I promise to come there. It's always a pleasure. It's great to hear you, Ilham, the Port of Antwerp, with all the inspiring examples that you are implementing. And it's a pleasure to see all of you, at least for you to see me and me to be with you. So let me flick back, let's say 8 months ago. You know, it feels like 8 years ago, if I'm honest, but 8 months ago, we all went to the World Economic Forum, and stakeholder capitalism was the theme that was put at the center of that particular meeting. We were all talking, those of us who were in sustainability, that 2020 would be a super year. There would be a big global meeting on biodiversity and the nature loss and what we were going to do. The COP26 on climate change would come to the UK and would be making us real progress in climate change. It was also the time that forest fires were destroying Australia, were burning big parts of Siberia down. It was the time that Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion were making a lot of noise and criticizing business for the lack of response. It was also the time that social tensions in many parts in the world were rising. The yellow vests, the protests in Hong Kong, the protests in Latin America, Chile in particular. And so we thought this is going to be the year in which we're going to change everything. And then COVID struck. And indeed, the year changed everything, but not quite the way we had envisioned. If you go back to the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos of this year, so of 8 months ago, you can download a thing that is called the Global Risk Report. This report gets published every year, and for the first time in 2020, the top 5 risks that were identified were environmental risks, climate change, nature loss, all these topics were mentioned there. So not economic risks, not terrorism risk, but all environmental risks were topping the chart. Interestingly enough, that global risk report did not talk about pandemics, not to be found. And that just showed how ill-prepared the world actually is to think through shocks. And not just the world. This is not blaming the World Economic Forum, but I would argue most companies that are in this meeting today will have had shocks. And it's true. It's amazing how fast all of us have been able to move to the digital world where, you know, business can continue. But it's also true that in many supply chains around the world, there have been real shocks and real disturbances. And we are still dealing with some of the fallout of that. So we were ill prepared. The resilience of business and of countries, but certainly of business, has been put at the test. And if we, in our work in the WBCSD, look at what are the vulnerabilities that have been exposed by this COVID crisis, we came to the following 4 items. First and foremost, we have built a system which gives the primacy to economy over everything else. And that is, in times of big human suffering, a thing to consider. Secondly, COVID has exposed the reality of inequality. Particular countries, not to be mentioned by name, have signed, many CEOs there signed the declaration of stakeholder capitalism. Within 6 or 7 weeks after the outbreak of the crisis, more than 50 million people are unemployed, losing their health insurance, at the time of one of the biggest health crises that the world has ever faced. The third thing we have seen is the fragility of our healthcare systems globally. Obviously in emerging markets, more so than even in countries like Belgium, but even Belgium, the Netherlands, and all the well-developed markets in the world, you saw that healthcare systems were at or over their capacity. And the last thing that the COVID crisis has exposed is this hyper focus on efficient supply chain. The just-in-time concepts that we have all deployed is something that we need to rethink. So if anything I can say is that the business as usual is now dead. We have to rethink what we do. It's economically proven to be risky. It's environmentally outright stupid. And socially, it will be unacceptable. So when the world started to talk after the first wave of the pandemic was slowing down, to say we need to build back better, if you now are in these sustainability global meetings, nobody talks about building back better anymore. Everybody talks about building forward better. We do not go back to how it was. We need to fundamentally rethink everything. And in order to do that, we need to keep the conversation somewhat simple. I represent, together with the Shift, our Belgian arm, the world of sustainability. And I have to admit that sustainability has become too complex. The Sustainable Development Goals are great in their thinking, but having 17 goals, 169 targets is not that easy to explain. So we in the World Business Council say, let's focus on 3 big items. The first is climate change. And we do no longer talk about climate change, we talk about climate emergency. The second thing is nature loss or biodiversity degradation. And the third thing to focus on is inequality. So these are the 3 big topics that the world must address when it builds back or builds forward better. And that leads to this conversation that this is no longer about tweaking a manufacturing site or thinking about the type of transport we're going to use to come to our work or travel the world. This is about fundamentally rethinking systems. Because one thing that COVID has brought to us is everything is interdependent. Now, the crisis, the health crisis, emerged from China, but before we knew it, it spread around the world. The world has become interconnected. If you listen to the scientists, the stress that humans and human interventions are putting on the natural system is causing these type of pandemics to become more likely. So human intervention leads to health concerns. Health concerns accelerate inequality concerns. Health prevention, like the lockdown we have all experienced, is causing environmental benefits. It's a very interesting notion. In the month of April, when almost half the world's population was in lockdown, working from home, or at least commuting a lot less, we saw that the global CO2 emissions reduced by 8%. That sounds like an okay number, but here's the reality check. If we want to meet the Paris Agreement, we need to halve emissions between now and 2030 globally. That means we need to reduce emissions by 7% annually each year. That means that if half the world's population sits at home, doesn't travel, doesn't commute to work, doesn't do many of the things which we normally do, we achieve 8%. It makes you feel how impactful it will have to be, how significant the change will have to be to ever achieve the halving of emissions by 2030. So sustainability is now about system transformations. We at the World Business Council say there are 6 big system transformations that will play out in the next 10 to 20 years. The first one is the energy system needs to totally decarbonize. No, listen to science. We need to be net zero by no later than 2050. We need to halve emissions by 2030. Every company, everyone in the audience today, if you have not set a net zero target by 2050, you are now beginning to fall behind the curve. This will become the norm that companies need to underwrite. The second big transformation is around the use of resources. We must stop the wasteful use of resources. We move to a circular economy where reuse and recycling becomes the norm. The third system that needs to change is the food system itself. And that's probably one of the more complex systems to change, because this is not just about emissions or about nature loss. This is about emissions, nature loss, inclusive economy, and about healthy diets for all at affordable price levels. The fourth system that needs to change is the social contract. We used to call this the people system in WBCSD, where we would talk about human rights, where we would talk about the future of work, but this is quickly becoming the conversation on what is business going to do about inequality? What is the social contract for the rest of this century in order to make this all work? The fifth system that needs to change is the way we think about cities, the urbanization, the mobility solutions, the way we design and build buildings. Those are the 5 big economic systems that need to change. So when you run an organization like the World Business Council, and I'm sure the same applies in Belgium for the shift, you see this crisis unfold. You expect it to enter into a deep economic recession. You ask yourself, what is this going to do for sustainability in the companies that join these type of organizations? And our experience to date, and I'll be interested to hear what the experience in Belgium is that sustainability is becoming more important for companies, not less important. There is more emphasis on what collaborative solutions can produce than there is less interest. And over the last few months, we've seen amazing examples. In the middle of the COVID crisis emerge. You know, we heard some of the Port of Antwerp, we heard some in Solvay, but other ones are out there too. BP, Shell, Total, in different periods during the COVID lockdowns, all came out with net zero emission targets before 2050. Oil and gas companies saying it is possible to be net zero. Daimler, the automotive company, doubling down on its ambition 2039, saying we will be net zero. The products we build, the factories we use, and the supplies we put into our vehicles will be net zero by 2039. Apple topped that one, saying we will be net zero in everything we produce by 2030. And this is an indication of what I see happen at the moment, particularly around climate change. It is leading to a race to the top. Business is beginning to understand that integrating sustainability into the strategy, not in the CSR department, but in the core strategy of business, is what is going to determine the competitive position of your company. Only this week, yesterday, Unilever announced to put $1 billion into taking all fossil fuel elements out of their detergents business. IKEA coming out saying, we're going to invest another $600 million to decarbonize all of our supply chain, I think by 2030 they have said. So this is all great. Sustainability is more important. Climate change gets real attention. System change is now the conversation. But I told you we needed 6 system transformations, and I only gave you the 5. The 6th one is we need to rethink capitalism itself. If we do not get capital markets to understand the impacts that business has, integrate it into their capital allocation and capital valuation models, none of the sustainability efforts can go far enough, fast enough. We need to rethink capitalism. And this is not a speech that will lead to we must now rethink capitalism as a whole. This is how do we reinvent, re-incentivize capitalism. So let me give you a few examples of things that need to change. First, we need to redefine what the definition of risk is in the capitalist model. If you look in the risk assessment tools that listed companies use, all of the risks that people assess are the financial risks. What is the leverage on your balance sheet? Can you repay your debt if sales drops down by 5%? Credit rating type of elements. We must include the environmental and the social risks into those risk assessments. Secondly, we must integrate the S into the ESG. Most companies are pretty well educated in their environmental impacts and the solutions and opportunities that bringing those solutions can bring. Too few of us are truly understanding what the social contribution and or impact can be that our businesses have. We need to change the horizon away from the very short-termism, speculative capital markets to a more longer-term view. And we need to include the externalities. A very simple and powerful example is last year a report was brought out that took a look at the food system. The food system globally creates $10 trillion of market value annually. So this is many companies, market caps and the likes, $10 trillion in total. That particular report calculated what are the external impacts that are not included in those valuations of the food system. And the answer is negative $12 trillion. So financially, we create $10 trillion of value annually, but in terms of health costs as well as environmental damages, $12 trillion of negative impacts, i.e., in an integrated basis, the food system actually destroys $2 trillion a year. That needs to be factored into what we think is value-adding businesses. So we need to move to stakeholder capitalism. And stakeholder capitalism is now the most en vogue label that people put on this. You know, I've heard everything from integrated capitalism, long-term capitalism, but let's all call it stakeholder capitalism. There is real progress now that we see happen. If you look into the companies that have the label of ESG assets, they are outperforming the markets globally. We, in our membership, have run the analysis. On average, our members outperform stock exchanges by 8% over the last 6 months. We have seen the initiatives that Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, now special envoy for the United Nations, is taking. TCFD, the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, will become the norm. During COP26, he will do everything in his power to make that mandatory in as many countries as he can find. There is now a massive project underway to create the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, because obviously we cannot only think about climate risks, we need to integrate all environmental risks. We finally see there is good progress towards a harmonized ESG reporting system. GRI, SASB, and other frameworks are coming together and harmonizing their system. The World Economic Forum, the IBC, is working on a standardized set of 22 ESG indicators that all companies must be using. In our assessment, for stakeholder capitalism to become real, there is, however, one important missing element in the conversation today, and that is the conversation between corporates and investors. I can ask Ilham, I can ask anyone on the line here today, if you do your roadshows, do you get enough questions about your sustainability impacts or opportunities? Over the last 12 months, what I hear from CEOs is we get a lot more questions about climate change and climate-related elements than we got in the past. But still, if you look into capital markets, there is no differentiation whether you have or do not have a proper answer to this in terms of the cost of capital your company attracts. It is true these days that there is plenty of companies who have put out bonds or other forms of financing that attract a lower interest rate depending on the ESG targets that they agree upon. But if you ask the banks who provide those loans, do you bank actually get a lower cost of capital for those finances because the company uses it in a more sustainable way? The answer is no. This is just a marketing tool because that's how we attract more financing. And we believe that ESG companies on the whole are better managed companies. So we must come to a situation where this better governance, TCFD, the better information, standardized ESG, is being used and understood by investors, integrated into the capital allocation models that they run. And therefore, stakeholder capitalism will work the moment that the cost of capital of a business reflects the sustainability performance of that business. The more sustainable you are, the lower your long-term risk will be, the lower the cost of capital ought to be, the lower the interest rate or the higher the PE ratio should be. Once we achieve that, once we truly integrate sustainability into the capitalist models, then we have stakeholder capitalism at work, and then we'll see an enormous acceleration of the innovation that business is so good at providing. So that's where we currently see the developments most. In the World Business Council, which brings together 200 global companies from around the world, we are doing 3 things on this agenda. And obviously we'll make that work available to the Shift and to all companies involved in Belgium. The first one, as part of Vision 2050, we are making the case on why capitalism should change and what the changes ought to be. The second thing is, only last week, we announced an innovative and I would argue breakthrough collaboration between WBCSD and PRI, the Principles for Responsible Investment. PRI brings together 3,000 signatories, all the major asset owners and asset investors in the world. And together we will form a task force that is going to change the way corporates and investors engage with each other around these topics. And third, but last but not least, we will provide companies with projects, tools, solutions to integrate shareholder capitalism into your models, to truly get to the risk management, the disclosure tools, as well as the investor relation tools to make these stories come alive and change the way capital markets will value your businesses. So that's it. Stakeholder capitalism is a great promise. We need to do a lot of work, I would argue, in the next 12 months to make that promise come alive. But if we do, it will be the way to change the way business operates. Thank you. The most famous words in 2020, you are on mute.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Could you hear us?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
There we are. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Ilham. Thank you, Jacques. You've been giving us a lot of food for thought for tonight. And I must say, as your moderator for tonight, lots of these things were recognizable. I work on day-to-day basis for GCOM, the Global Covenant of Mayors, and we're asking ourselves these questions for our 11,000 cities every day. And what resonates really is also the idea of system change. And therefore, I really prefer doing these network events live because apart from bringing transparency and explaining systems and challenges, it's also a matter of sharing experiences, of sharing good ideas, what works, what were barriers, and how do we cope with that. And I think it's usually easier if you see each other, if you can linger on a bit in a conversation to see where it goes and what details, or what examples can be given. And therefore, I think to go to a bit more informal setting, I suggest we can stop the recording so that we are in a more informal space.